got me. When my heart was low, it turned to kamikaze.
Well guys, we are gathered here today not just because my No Nut November streak has finally ended thanks to this image, but also because we're finally seeing the inevitable end of the boy band Brockhampton, this time going out with The Family. That's mainly just a Kevin solo piece, but I'm not surprised since he practically became the face of the group after 2019. But to keep things optimistic, we did get a slew of more lyrical bars and creative production to make for quite an interesting send-off. Alright, so going into this album, I can tell you outright it's not a full Brockhampton album, but in reality, it's a Kevin Abstract project with the Brockhampton name to get the guys out of their contract with RCA. Taking inspiration from when Frank Ocean did the same thing about 6 years ago to Def Jam, but for what it's worth, at least Kevin didn't allow the circumstances to hinder his ability to make some pretty solid quality music. Although it was disappointingly short, with 17 tracks running at around 35 minutes, but going through this project we do get a slew of inspirations, with Kevin tapping into the Kanye sound and the boom bap 90s hip hop sound for his rapping style, getting a bit more lyrical and emotional on a majority of these tracks, mainly talking about how he feels responsible for Brockhampton's breakup, such as with the track Gold Teeth, in which Kevin reminisces on his days at Corpus Christi and the saturation days back in 2017 before things became the way they are now. But then he also takes his first big jab at himself on the track All That, in which he talks about a major falling out between him and Dom, and how he tried to count his chickens early by jumping onto the solo act before things could truly pan out, and in the end realizing how all the money and fame truly wasn't worth the disruptions that he's caused. And then you have the track Good Time that I feel takes some inspiration from Tyler the Creator, maybe going with the Igor vibe, with Kevin acknowledging his flaws and how he's always tried to turn every spectacle of the band's lives into this artistic piece, which in the end made for a more toxic relationship amongst each other. But I think the track that hits me the hardest, and is probably one of my favorites from this album, is The Family, with Kevin going in on how he might have sold out for the fame and how his fellow members have started to look at him differently over time, such as Merlin asking him if he truly sold his soul to the devil, and Kevin thinking possibly because he couldn't even get his mother out the ghetto. And I feel like that line right there speaks miles into the message that Kevin is trying to send on this project, definitely feeling like he has some regrets and how he's truly blinded himself from his original vision due to the status that he's gained. And the track Brockhampton basically shows the example of this, with Kevin talking about how RCA was trying to get him to make these more TikTok pop radio hit songs that they honestly didn't want to do, citing the song Count on Me from their previous album Roadrunner as a prime example. But while there were a lot of messages and whatnot being tossed on this album, I can't sit here and act like this doesn't have some flaws. See, while I get the point of the project, at the same time I still feel like it could have been better if this is going to be how the band finishes things off. Like, there were some high notes with tracks such as Big Pussy and The Family, but then you had tracks such as The American Life and Southside that I truly didn't care for from a musical standpoint, seeming like filler tracks to give the album its proper length and not much more. And then from a production side, while the sampling was cool for the majority of this project, I feel like the vocal mixing kind of fucked some of it up a bit as well, because I believe a while back I said my biggest issues with music production is how the vocals tend to get drowned to shit by heavy 808s, or how they could be so muddy and scratchy, making it hard to understand anything from a more lyrical rapper such as Kevin, such as with the track RZA. But for what it's worth, each song was given its own flair thanks to the beats, although not everyone really stayed in tune, kind of steering away from the energy that the rest of the project had, such as Back on the Road, Any Way You Want Me, and The American Life. But I will say that I did like the beat for All That, taking sounds from that 90s, 2000s pop and R&B wave to give a track with such a deeper tone behind it some energy to try and keep things in order. And surprisingly, although this was a Kevin Abstract album, doesn't mean that we didn't at least get a little Brockhampton, with Bareface jumping in on a few tracks such as Back on the Road and The Family to try and give these tracks some flavor, but I feel doing a lot more justice for the latter than the former. Oh, y'all thought we were finished? Yeah, I wish we were too. But as per usual with every hip hop act, they just can't let their careers go. And this time with Brockhampton, they announced a surprise album that dropped last night called TM, being the contract ended with RCA and the quote unquote actual ending of the group, this time tapping into pop trap sounds, pop dance beats, and a little bit of that classic Brockhampton experimental sound to try and get that final grasp of appeal before they officially die out. Cue the intro.
Texas boy, the way I love it, man.
Alright, so if y'all want my honest opinions, because it's not like you could really make your own, this shit sucks ultra ass. I mean, to be Brockhampton's actual final album, you'd think they'd be able to put more on the table, but instead this just feels like the most phoned in compilation of tracks I've ever heard. I mean, there's no direction due to it being so all over the place, not enough energy from everyone to really relate back to the listener, and then there are some tracks that just didn't even need to be on here, such as Man on the Moon and Goodbye, being these outright dance pop tracks that do absolutely nothing for this project. But at least I can say that the former could have worked as a single, while the latter just felt completely forgettable. And it's crazy because on the Kevin solo album that just dropped, he was talking about how RCA was forcing them to make these more radio-friendly pop songs that steered far away from what they actually wanted to do, such as on the song Count on Me. And then when listening to this album, this just feels exactly like what the hell Kevin was talking about, with these cheap catchy choruses, simple verses from Dom and Matt, and the heavy reliance on the pop trap sound to try and grasp at the little bit of appeal they can get before they officially dissolve. And it sucks because if this is truly their final project together, you'd think they'd be able to give a proper send-off to the fans who supported them since 2017 when Saturation was popping, but instead we're just given this messy compilation of straight doo-doo ass that I just don't want to revolve around my playlist at all. But as for the production, as stated before, it mainly relied on the pop trap sound to try and carry us through these more easily digestible tracks such as FMG, Animal, and New Shoes. But that doesn't mean we didn't get an interesting array of instrumentals as well, with tracks such as Better Things and Crucify Me, with the former taking this more slower, wavier vibe like a Don Toliver song that has some production from Mike Dean or whatever. But even still, that song had nothing much going for it aside from the beat, since the chorus was very annoying and everything else felt a bit tossed together, with only Joba's verse to close the song out being the only thing I actually liked. And then as for the latter, it mainly just piggybacked off its previous track, giving us some nice little piano and drums to actually try and give this track some flair, but still for the majority, it's pretty forgettable as well. I think if there's one beat from this project that I actually did mess with, it would be the intro track FMG, catching my attention the most with its more experimental trap sound it went for. It kinda reminded me of the beats from Iridescence with its hard-hitting 808s and eerie energy that I feel made for a pretty alright intro to an otherwise lackluster album. But overall, neither one of these projects were great, but for what it's worth, at least the family had something to bring to the table, while TM felt like a complete waste of my time from beginning to end. And while I'll miss the days that the group brought me back in my junior and senior years of high school, I believe I can also say without a doubt that Brockhampton breaking up is something that needed to happen. So to put these projects on a scale, I think I'll give the family a high 6 out of 10, while TM gets a, I don't even know, out of 10, because that shit was just so disappointing. But how do you guys feel about Brockhampton's final albums? Do you think they'll come back? Let me know down in the comments or liking and subscribing, follow my IG and Twitter, and follow Chocolate on Instagram for more illustrations. And on that note, I'll see you guys on Monday when I put a cease and desist on all future Brockhampton albums. Peace.
Grab on! Grab on! Grab on! Grab on! Grab on! Grab on! Grab on!